major urban design planning project. We're now going to another project that deals obviously with the transit oriented time. We go to Pittsburgh. Andrew's going to take us there and show us this project.
Thank you so much. Hello everyone. I'd like to start off today by thanking my thesis committee consisting of Professor Ralph Bennett and Carl Dupuy, who are vital in a lot of the development and helping assist with all the housing types and a lot of the urban planning and the difficulty of urban planning Pittsburgh with all different topography and a lot of unique sort of existing conditions. I'd also like to thank my classmates for their own thesis presentations who have inspired me, and their own work has pushed me to be a better designer and architect. And I also like to thank my friends and family who have supported me over the years and supported me through 6.5 years of education, and I thank them for their constant support in that. And I'd also like to thank my fiance for her support in this project, and her own education in physical therapy have sparked a lot of the ideas and philosophies of how we can live better together as different generations. So this thesis explores the relationship of the nuclear family and the changing of what we consider the nuclear family in America through mixed-use development, different building typologies in different residential sizes, while within an intergenerational community. This thesis proposes how to change how future communities will interact with one another and how future generations will interact with one another. The result of choosing an intergenerational community and having the option of living within a multi-generational household is a life of better social interaction, happiness, and overall health to occupants. So today's agenda will be covering over typical development being generally age segregated. We'll cover into the benefits of what intergenerational development has, and that will then lead us to testing principles in Pittsburgh and through the East Liberty neighborhood plan. And then we'll be talking about a community size through a typical block, and then we'll talk about the flexibility within that typical block as well. So by 2040, older adults, children, and youth combined will make up 40% of the U.S. population. Currently in America, 1 in 5 American households are multi-generational. And this is a result of the changing of the household. You can see a graphic that shows back in 1950 that 21% of households were multi-generational. And there's a decline over the years into 1980 where we've been steadily increasing the amount of people living within multi-generational households. And you can see the numbers from 1950 to this statistic in 2014 that we've doubled the millions of people living within multi-generational households. And a closer statistic is in 2016, we saw that 64 million people were living within multi-generational households, still increasing on that 2014 number. So what are the different types of multi-generational households? Well, one being 3-generation, which consists of 43% of the 64 million people living within those households. We have grand families where an older adult is taking care of a child under the age of 18. We also have 2 adult generations, which consist of someone over the age of 25 living with someone who is also a working family as well, or a working individual as well. And a little less common, but more common amongst immigrant families is 4-generation. Where their ideas of how families interact with one another are much different than how the typical American family is set up. So, what type of housing do we live in currently in the United States? Well, this is a breakdown of how we live in the United States by major cities, and you can see as the chart goes down, we end in Detroit with a significant amount of percentage being proposed to the single unit detached. And Pittsburgh is very similar, but I wanted you to focus in on New York City, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. Of the range of this missing middle pieces of single unit attached and 10 to 19 units, providing much more variety and flexibility of units, and limiting the amount of single unit detached in this area. So we can see, in specifically Washington, D.C., the overall percentage of that housing variety is 57%, consisting and contributing to the missing middle that we see in America. And this thesis is interested in pursuing those types of housing contributing to providing housing in that missing middle of the United States. So what are some housing issues that we see in the United States? Well, we see housing that is age segregated. This type of housing is common amongst individuals over the age of 55 and pushing them to these type of communities as a result of health and disability issues or the desire to leave the city and the noises that a city might contribute to. We also see housing that is only for specific age groups that are within our urban development that is exclusive to certain age groups. But this is different from what a survey found from Generations United that found that 2 in 3 Americans desire to spend more time with people outside of their own age group. So this type of housing not contributing and creating more interaction amongst different age groups. So why should we even create intergenerational communities? Well, it creates more cohesive communities. Studies have shown that intergenerational programs increase levels of physical activity, better diets, decreased time watching TV. We also see that young people are shown to improve academic performance, confidence, self-esteem, and also have positive attitudes towards learning, which is good. So what creates spaces for different generations to coexist? Well, one of them is providing housing variety, and one of them being a project by Perkins Eastman in DC, the proposal for the McMillan sand filtration site, which proposes a brownfield redevelopment and incorporating a bunch of housing variety while allowing for a certain area of the site to have a community center, and a certain percentage of the housing being dedicated to seniors within this development, allowing for the range of different age groups to interact with one another. Another key component in allowing generations to interact is flexible housing. And these are projects by Olsen Kundig out of Seattle. And the way that he uses different projects and mechanical systems to transform the spaces that we live in. And providing different ways of changing 2 different spaces and connecting them to identify making a different space. So incorporating movable walls as another option. And another key to flexible housing is connecting the interior to the exterior of the development, bridging the gap between what we consider the interior of the dwelling. So what are some keys to intergenerational living? Well, there's 3 aspects to intergenerational relationships. One of them having within flexible housing that we talked about, being flexible within the single-family detached, apartment units, and any sort of attached housing that we have. We also have relationships that occur within public and private spaces, and that happening in the streets that we design, plazas that we design, and any parks that we design as well. And also connecting different ages together is having a community that is transit-oriented, providing street connections and connecting across municipal boundaries in any sort of way, and connecting neighborhoods that might be disconnected. So any sort of development that happens in the future should follow these sort of set of 5 principles. That we have an age-integrated community where the young and old can live from one another, unite society across all age groups, and this results in improving the health and happiness of all ages. We also need to make sure that we are careful to honor the existing rhythm, and we transition carefully between homes, residential, institutional areas surrounding any development. We also need to make sure that we include programmatic ways to create community connections, providing libraries, community centers, open spaces for these generations to interact. We need to make sure that, again, we connect neighborhoods across any sort of transit divides or any boulevards that are creating a division between 2 municipal boundaries. And we also need to make sure that we maintain a commitment to sustainability, that we improve the existing site that was there before, and we make it better than what was existing. And these 5 principles are key to any sort of development that happens. So what we follow up with is we wanted to test these principles on a specific site, and we chose to come to Pittsburgh, PA. Now, the unique thing about Pittsburgh is the amount of transportation connections that it offers. The Amtrak that goes from New York City ends in Pittsburgh, and another line that starts in DC and ends in Chicago all run through Pittsburgh, PA. And a unique thing about Pittsburgh is it incorporates a bus-dedicated only busway, that this is showing a graphic of just one of the busways and the different bus loops that connect downtown to the outskirts of Pittsburgh. The area highlighted in orange is signifying that that takes 10 minutes to get to the downtown area of Pittsburgh. And another unique thing about Pittsburgh is the amount of future development and transit-oriented development. This is an example of a community that is bridging across that busway and creating a variety of use of different housing types and different housing options while increasing the density along that transportation connection. There's also an emphasis in Pittsburgh about brownfield redevelopment, and the Urban Redevelopment Authority has identified a lot of different areas that are of interest and in need of densifying. Specifically, there's a lot of investment in the East Liberty Bakery Square area, which is east of the downtown region of Pittsburgh. And this area consists of quite a bit of development opportunity, and it incorporates a bus stop that bridges the two gap between these areas that are highlighted in orange and that are highlighted in the green as well. These are some existing proposals you can see between the two along this busway station of increasing the density along a major street called Penn Avenue that runs through, and a bus station that is at the corner edge there. This is also another development that's been completed, quite a bit of investment into the redevelopment of an existing Nabisco plant into office space where Google headquarters are located, Uber is located there as well, and office space for the University of Pittsburgh, amongst other tech giants are looking to get involved in this space as well. But increasing the density of the site and providing housing options for people in this location. There's also an interest in transit-oriented development in this east end of Pittsburgh, and investment of redeveloping this transit center where the bus station is located, and providing more of a walkable community and more natural connections to individuals that would be living within this area. We also see currently, this past October, a proposal to change an existing ice cream store that's located within this plaza and renovate it into a retail and more office space for individuals, connecting to the existing Bakery Square redevelopment. And you see a lot of these new buildings in this region existing. This was a property that was a middle school beforehand. So they've invested quite a lot of density in this area and a lot of finances into redeveloping this area. There's also proposals for redeveloping along the corner of where the East Liberty bus station is at, increasing the density and offering retail spaces that is there existing. Existing there now is a giant Eco grocery store with the familiar parking lot in front of the grocery store. So there's quite a bit of opportunity in Pittsburgh's East End. And this is where this thesis site was chosen, to develop between East Liberty transit-oriented development and Bakery Square. And this site has a lot of connections to universities, the relationship of connection to a bus station stop to connect to these different areas of Pittsburgh, and a lot of major streets that run and connect the different neighborhoods through Pittsburgh. So what's there in this site existing? You'll see Bakery Square off to the right-hand side, and the East Liberty development on the left-hand side, adjacent to the bus stop. And there's an area that incorporates strip malls and also a gated community that only has one entrance in and one entrance out. Not creating any sort of pedestrian walkway, and walking the site you feel uncomfortable walking along that major street called Penn Avenue. So this proposal proposes developing heavily along the major boulevard street of Penn Avenue, incorporating public spaces for individuals to interact with one another, and providing housing variety for all individuals to interact with one another. You'll see within this the emphasis of incorporating different levels of green spaces, having different programmatic reasons for those green spaces being a more active one, versus a more public commons where events could be held adjacent to a public library, and other private green spaces dispersed throughout the urban plan as well. And also the streets are also a link of vegetated connections to these parks and green spaces. Another key piece in this development is creating connections among streets. The existing development doesn't have any sort of permeability through, and by incorporating more street connections, it connects these neighborhoods across Penn Avenue, creating more walkable community into this development. And you see a major street that is a major connection point, an existing Ellsworth Avenue didn't connect all the way through to this Bakery Square offices, but the creation of this street is important to create a neighborhood connection from the transit-oriented development and also bus station to the office space that Bakery Square offers. So there's quite a bit of, again, emphasizing the transit connections and specifically towards the bus station, incorporating a lower plaza to go underneath Shady Avenue to create more walkable community and people to easily access this transportation. And you can see that the Amtrak line runs right adjacent to the site as well. So there's a lot of the creation of bringing a typical block that really brought a lot of more order to the urban plan. There's a lot of different street geometries in this area, and by simplifying and creating a regular block idea helps individuals identify the streets in a better way. And creating more permeability across these longer axes while increasing the density along Penn Avenue was an important piece into this as well. You'll see within street sections, and this is cutting through Penn Avenue, the main boulevard that separates the existing gated community and the shopping areas, that we're replacing a lot of the retail that was removed in that area, increasing shopping and services along that main corridor, and also including housing along that edge as well. And we also see the difference of at the neighborhood connection of Ellsworth Avenue that goes from the bus station down to Bakery Square, of creating a neighborhood connection and a much more natural walkway to the office space. And we'll also see a difference between these two streets, one that's closer to Penn Avenue, incorporating retail to wrap around the corners into the secondary streets of the development, versus a street that's further back, closer to the neighborhood development, including more common spaces for individuals that are living within these kind of communities. So this is a look at what is there before and the change of car-dependent society into a mixed-use area that incorporates a public green space into this area, and allowing for a lot more walkability. And this is, again, is looking at Penn Avenue, the change in the intersection at Penn Avenue and Shady Avenue. And you'll see Bakery Square in the distance on the left-hand side, and the incorporation of a library and office space and a common space off to the right-hand side of the image. We'll also see, again, behind in this image is looking at the bus station stop is behind you, and you'll see the termination of what Ellsworth Avenue was before. It terminated with the giant eagle, providing not any sort of street connection through the development, and by linking a neighborhood connection through this transit, or through this neighborhood, is an important link to any sort of working conditions. You also see, this is a put-forward condition looking within the Bakery Square offices on the right-hand side and apartments on the left-hand side, and the termination of that one street ending with the gated community behind in that vegetative area, and the proposed townhomes that are car-dependent. And by creating a street connection through, we're creating a much more pedestrian connection to this sort of development. This again, emphasizing the community space, replacing what was there before. We could have chosen to densify heavily on this corner edge here, but the result of the thesis was creating a common space for individuals of all ages to interact with one another. So within the typical block, the proposal is incorporating retail, service space, common space amongst, and you'll see here that the numbers vary in the sizes of units. And this is a result of the apartments being able to be flexible. But the typical block being able to be changed from 460 people to 660 people, depending on how the apartments are laid out and depending on how individuals decide to live with one another. You'll see here again emphasizing the creation of retail along Penn Avenue and retail being continued on the secondary street, and the creation of common spaces in more of the neighborhood connection area. And again, you'll see the varied use of original apartment sizes in the varied amount of different arrangements that they can be within. And also you'll see in Penn Avenue still another level of retail being created on the boulevard space. So within the flexibility of the apartments follow this idea that they have their own set of apartments to start off. But what can happen as a result of an open plan, they can have division walls between the apartments being light construction that can be removed to combine different apartments. And another way that they can do it is have movable walls where shared apartments such as this one highlighted in red the wall can be pushed to the side and a space that maybe the older generation can interact with one another, combining their two common spaces to create a more larger common space amongst two different apartments. And this again emphasizing the varied use of apartments, and also that apartments can be replaced and incorporate common spaces throughout the design. So flexibility within the attached housing is a little different. The attached housing, you can have a set core within people that can all be related to one another, and also you can incorporate areas where different individuals can live with one another, and they can also be a part of the main family within this sort of development. And there's different options within how different individuals with the same family can relate to one another. These three different ideas propose different ways of being more attached versus less attached to the core house. So you see the last option, the housing being above the garage space that is in that attached housing. And these three options providing the flexibility for people to choose where they want to live within a home and decide how connected they want to be as their own individuality. So flexibility is incredibly important to create a community that interacts with each other a lot more, providing more options for families to interact with one another, and giving them the option to decide how they interact with one another is incredibly important to create age integration and to allow different generations to interact with one another. All of this being able to happen within different building typologies on the sites, having individuals have the choice of where they want to live and what kind of density they want to live is really important to the flexibility of people's options. All of this happening within an intergenerational shared site where people are able to interact with different ages naturally, and this being able to happen easily amongst people. So I want to thank you all for listening, and I'd like to take this time to open it up to questions.
Wow, a lot of stuff. So a couple of questions. The gated community, that's fairly high-end, I assume?
Not really.
Not really?
It's kind of run down a little bit. So it's
public housing?
I don't think it's affordable housing, but it was built in 1970, and it consists of townhomes and units, but they have like a specific community center in one of the images, and it's not been upkept, but it's not designated as a affordable housing district.
Did you look at creating any green space in your master plan?
Yeah.
How many units total do you have?
Units total?
Where do people go to play?
So there is an area off to the north side of the YMCA area where people would be able to play. But one of the good things about the typical block is you'll see in the urban plan that it can be expanded upon and certain units can be replaced. But there was an idea of creating some more green spaces in this development, but a lot of the ideas for increasing the density was that a lot of these play areas are off in other directions. You can see in this image here, there's a major park that's off in the distance here, and a football field that's off there.
Did you, as you line Penn Avenue with a series of flat top buildings, effectively, different building sizes, your drawings have an expression of similarity.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you look at creating any hierarchies or markers, or trying to create a sense of a large gathering space at the intersection of Penn and this sort of cross street. Did that ever come into your thinking as you were developing your general plan?
Yeah, so I'd emphasize a lot of the idea for a marker happens right adjacent to the bus station spot, being that the transit connection there, having a library space in a taller tower at that location, trying to create more variability, and that being the center of the community adjacent to that space there.
It's not the center of the community, it's the edge. Maybe that would work as an announcement to the fact that you're entering that community, but it's really pushed off to the edge.
Sure.
Not integrated into the community.
Yeah, so I'd emphasize, I certainly understand your viewpoint. I looked at looking at the overall master plan of not this development having to have a specific center, but thinking about where would a center for people across different neighborhoods be. So Penn Avenue, existing now, is a boundary between Shadyside Avenue, Lemire, and then right across the bus station stop is East Liberty, designated as East Liberty. So a lot of the thoughts of creating the center at that location was providing center for those three neighborhoods where they intersect, because they all intersect at the intersection of Shady Avenue and Penn Avenue at that location there. But I certainly understand your thought of creating a center
At the
within
end
the
of the day,
building.
the busway is a divider.
Right.
You don't have any choice. It creates an edge, and you place your single possible centering space on the edge.
Sure.
Public built in a community this size, again, placing a public building on an edge rather than creating some sort of centering piece is an interesting decision.
Just two corrections. The proper pronunciation is Schliberty at Johnny. Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
If they're in Pittsburgh, they talk about Johnny.
Yeah.
So eliminating Johnny will be a real problem for them folks up there.
Yeah.
Anyhow, aside from that, it's nice to see a project in Pittsburgh, being from there. It's very ambitious, and there's a lot of scales of consideration that are really terrifically handled, I think, from low-rise housing to high-rise housing. I guess I have a different point of view. I don't find the problem of the resource. I believe your idea about putting the civic building to be shared by neighborhoods in that location. It seems to make sense if it's something that all those neighborhoods share. I wonder a little bit though, like the Trader Joe's is at the edge and things. I wonder if there could be more synergy with retail and those sorts of things where maybe the Trader Joe's sits underneath that residential building.
Sure.
So that the sort of benefits of retail and placemaking could be more concentrated in those places.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit diffuse right there. And maybe there are ways that even if the space were smaller and there was civic activities, residential activities, and retail activities all in one place, it would make some sense. I think what David's looking for is something I'm looking for too, is one of those other little places that one could say, like, you could probably benefit from that Four Corners intersection there of East Liberty and Denniston, maybe one of those being sort of an inside corner, so you could have a small plaza there. Just the little places in the neighborhood that are sprinkled throughout that help to, sort of aerate things in a sense. That help to kind of give a little bit of breathing space for public spaces. It could be that maybe there's a series of them on Denniston that lead to the YMCA and stuff, so that you have a sense that there's a different attitude there than there is on this street, East Liberty Boulevard, and things.
Sure.
Which I think would make some sense. What's the idea behind the sort of roofscape of the low-rise buildings? It seems there's a very particular idea of a lot of things doing that. And stuff. Is there a design intent there that is should be explained, or?
A lot of the idea was trying to create that the units were separate visually in some way, and a lot of the geometries were just trying to create a difference between what was happening across the street of a different style, but a lot of them, other than that, there's not really much thought into what
Well, the other thing I would say about that is those are all units that exist without really a rear yard. There's not much of a rear yard.
Correct.
So what I've seen in townhouse development of that sort is the migration of the rear yard to the roof, and that the roof becomes habitable. And so, this is a thing that EYA is pursuing as a townhouse developer in this market. So if you didn't have a rear yard, you may want to think about how you could inhabit the roof. And you still could have benefits of solar collection, things like that. But even if you had the sort of lidding of all that stuff kind of seems to preclude that. But in actual fact, having some private outdoor space, whether it's at the ground plane or whether it's up at the top of the building, would probably be a significant benefit.
Yeah.
The architecture of the buildings, it's kind of funny. It looks much better in the perspective there and in the isometric than it does in this drawing. And I don't know why that is. Is it because it's monochromatic and maybe it wouldn't be?
Yeah.
Because it seems like you developed some different color and material ideas over there that don't show up on here. Is that just a choice in terms of what you chose to emphasize?
Yeah. So I chose to emphasize a lot more of the materiality into the block, and that being repeated within this, but I found that showing the materiality of this was a little overwhelming in that drawing, but more trying to understand the space-making qualities
And
of
the
those
parking,
instead.
the parking would all be underground? Is that a viable thing in Pittsburgh, in an emerging market like this? Because lots of times in emerging neighborhoods like this, it just doesn't pencil to put the parking underground. You kind of have to either put a deck at grade or some sort of Texas donut or something. Is that something developers are doing? They're putting it underground?
Yeah, so I'd say that thought for that came from that East Liberty station. You can see adjacent to where the Amtrak runs through. There's 2 levels of parking underneath that. So that was a lot of thinking about that advantage that community had with that parking and trying to incorporate that here in that development. That's a good thought.
And it's East Liberty. It's all
East
one
Liberty.
word.
Yeah, East Liberty.
East Liberty.
You didn't talk funny.
Up there.
I guess I have a little bit more of an issue with some of the scale things that Matt was talking about. In particular, we don't have a section that's cut basically across through both of these 2 streets, right? In between the back of the retail and what is essentially a carriage house behind.
Oh, correct. Yeah. You're saying through.
Through one of the,
Correct.
Yeah, and that's the section, I mean, how much space is in between right here?
Yeah, this is about 16 to 20 feet, but it certainly is a little tight. Actually, I think it's actually increased. This street here, that street width is 16 feet, so that width there would be closer to 32 feet between the back.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, the part of this that I feel a little concerned about. And so those are 4-story buildings, or they're 3-story. So, I mean, one of the things in DC, there are obviously plenty of townhouses that are 4 stories high, and that may even walk up and walk down into a basement. There's, I think, a section through there and looking at the height increase, and we haven't really given them a backyard in many cases here, so there may be sort of a stoop culture that starts to develop, which you haven't really shown in terms of character. So I guess for me, that's the biggest thing that I wouldn't want them there.
Well, you're kind of looking for sun studies to see what the impact of the tall buildings would be on the shorter buildings.
Yeah. Well, and even they're backing up to retail, a block wall, basically, in that perspective there. So that sort of step down in character, maybe some of the buildings that are along East Sliberty, did I say that? Maybe some of the character of that turns to face the back of the building, and then you step down into the next block. So it's this block here, this piece and this piece. Maybe this turns to sort of negotiate and start to step down a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of the philosophy within this was this neighborhood connection and what was happening across in this piece, and there was thoughts of repeating what was happening in Bakery Square, which you'll see in here. They have an empty courtyard space that has a green space. So there's decisions within that to have a green space in that U and not having a back necessarily to that, but a lot of the idea there was creating, trying to incorporate a connection across and more of a neighborhood connection there. But I certainly agree with a lot of the issues of the backs of those houses.
Yeah, that I guess would go to some of the questions about a little bit more green space sprinkled within there. So I think that the sections that you've shown are really helpful. I didn't see them up here, and to put them in the presentation was really helpful because it goes back to really your initial concept of integrating the I think that the sections and the smaller units are more successful than what you're showing, at least what we're seeing of it in larger units. I mean, in that case, to sort of show Kundig and then say, like, I'm just going to make this removable wall, that I'm not convinced yet of that, that part. In the sections, I would certainly think about whether there's some double height spaces that could start to reinforce and really enhance the connection between the different generations.
Yeah.
It's really, really prevalent. This is really timely. It's just, I'm glad that you're addressing it. And so and again, I agree with Matt, it's nice to see it in Pittsburgh. This is a space that I'm glad to see you tackling that.
Up there in Pittsburgh. Pleasure for Steeler fans to live.
That's right.
Andrew, I'm not going to dwell on some of the things that I have already said. I have serious doubt, basically because they're not presenting how the change of scale and grading from the detached house all the way to the multifamily house is going to be. I think presenting a long section will be important to actually see that clearly, and that's going to reveal a lot of the things that have been spoken about, such as the center of the blocks and things like that. Also, I think that within that idea, your efforts in trying to make a distinguishable sort of the intergenerational condition of housing in the detached house is not the same, or doesn't seem reflected in the multifamily house, where we see this big block. I think you could have easily actually broken down that into something more along the lines of what you're doing in the smaller house. And I think that this actually may be a first approach to that, because you see those big blocks broken into smaller things. But I think that even within the big parts of the building, you could see a little more fractioned grading of that. But those are just things that I would review if this was developed and reviewed. My question will be along the lines of what you're trying to do, which is creating intergenerational spaces, and it's a little influenced by the previous thesis, which is I think there's a lot of cultural and how more than 3 generations are going to coexist, and it's happening in some of the places already. So they actually live under the same roof, and you're proposing a certain flexibility, but that's so clear to me in how only this happens in housing. There's a number of intergenerational centers that are actually looking for that, in which you bring people of different ages, such as it's not uncommon actually having daycares close to places where retired people are actually living, and even elder people. And I don't hear anything of that here, and I think that would be a great addition to what you have proposed. Not only given the option of how they could coexist together. I could tell you, I live with my mother and she didn't like it, so that's right. And that's because I'm a Latino family, so I was expected to have her in my house. She did not like it. So it would have been excellent to actually have her
Yeah.
own space and somehow create those barriers, those limits in which I would not go to hers and she would not to mine, and we will coexist somewhere. But beyond that, at the community level, I think it would be important to actually support this idea, because at some point, and I have to tell you, at some point of the whole conversation, it became so centered in the urban side of it that I forgot that it was an intergenerational project.
Yeah.
Meaning that doesn't emphasize it enough.
Yeah.
Okay? There's something of how these main, is it Penn Avenue?
Yeah.
That's right. I'm missing a little of context to understand how your project fits in the larger site. How and why Penn Avenue, it's the place to actually raise your scale, and how, where does it reach? You know, whether or not that is a center or a beginning,
Sure.
that will end somewhere. I think it would be a relevant thing to add.
Yeah, to discuss the importance of why Penn Avenue is the connection from Penn Avenue to, it connects all the way into downtown DC, so that there's several streets that connect the outskirts into
But I think
downtown.
architecture is what I want to see. Or-
From the view,
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
So a little further zooming out from that would have been very good.
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made before me, and I wanted to elaborate more on the cultural aspect of this, the intergenerational development. I think there was a lot of emphasis on the development piece and, you know, designing the sections, but again, not enough focus on the culture, I don't think. You said that McMillan, that development was one of your precedents. And I think that is a great precedent for intergenerational development. But Perkins Eastman also has a lot of, you know, they're kind of thought leaders in senior living,
Correct.
which I think could be something good to look into, because that's probably going to be one of the biggest challenges of developing a community like this.
Yeah.
Thinking about the older generations and how they're going to age in place in a place like this. It's
Yeah.
not just thinking about how they can coexist with the younger generations of their family,
Right.
but how they'd be comfortable living in this environment as they get older, and how we're catering to those needs. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on your initial research.
Yeah.
If you looked into
Yeah.
needs of seniors as they get older.
Yeah, this thesis originally started with the emphasis of senior living and trying, I certainly have done some research at looking at intergenerational programming of a daycare being on the ground floor and senior living being above. I've looked at a lot of that with shared sites, the idea of the young literally going to school there and the elderly generation is living there and creating that connection. So a lot of the thesis started off with that, but it ended up going into how to create more connections amongst all age groups to the older generation. So it kind of departed of being specifically senior living, but thinking about how can someone with the ability to live, or with the ability to die in place, how would they interact with different age groups? But it did start off as specifically looking at senior living.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's definitely a good goal to figure out how all these generations can interact with each other. Because
Yeah.
as you mentioned in the beginning, that's what's missing from senior living communities. They're
Right.
not able to interact with younger generations. So I think that is a great goal, and that seems to be the goal of your thesis, but I'm not sure we're addressing, you know, how we're going to cater to the needs of each generation. I think this is definitely focused on people that are more able, and you know, it feels just like a kind of regular development.
Sure.
Not necessarily catering to the
But isn't your, so David and I have been sitting here chatting, you should wait. David and I have been sitting here chatting about the partitions and things, and the viability of that. But before I hand the mic to David and make him talk about it, your thesis, though, is intergenerational by its urban design nature, by including different typologies that address different market segments of the housing market. So you will have, by nature, by including a lot of different types, different folks living in there. You will have people who want to own a house and have stairs and move up and down. And maybe one critique would be, maybe there could be more of that, you know. So for example, maybe some of these could be two-family houses where, you know, 2/2s where, you know, you rent out one and you own the other, and that's sort of a formula that some developers use to get people to re-inhabit the city, because they basically get to lease out a unit and live almost rent-free on the upper level, because it's a, you know, it's a fee simple thing there. So that might be one option there. And so maybe there could be even more spread of housing types across the typology matrix to be able to achieve that. And it might, you know, might minimize whether or not you really need to do all the things you're proposing about all the options. Because my experience is, even though there may be some people doing this in the marketplace, you know, senior living developers, man, they know their product, and it's this way, and this is how we do it, and the units are this big, and the grab bars go here, and blah, blah, blah. You know, and then your millennial developers, you know, they're making really small units, and they just want to cram as many millennials into the building as possible, and they know their product, and they're, you know, they know what exactly how much counter space and all that stuff that they need. So in a sense, the housing market, the people who, and David deals more about this than I do, but the people who build that stuff know their products, and the business of flexibility for them is not as great a concern, maybe since I've implicated you.
I think that, you know, I think that your scales, I'm going to go back to your plan. I think your scale stuff is interesting. I don't know this neighborhood in Pittsburgh. I don't know Pittsburgh. But, you know, at the end of the day, the notion of stepping down is positive. I don't know that you need to step down on your YMC size. There's nothing, you know, again, you've got an edge condition there. You could have higher density there. There's absolutely no reason to step down for things. I don't know housing in Pittsburgh per se, but, you know, I can tell you as a housing designer in Washington, D.C., we would never put walk-in, same level entrance to a 3-story unit that would be elevated, you know, 2 feet, 3 feet, ideally, and 2 feet ideally. So that there's a sense of separation and privacy between the street and the people that are living inside.
Yeah.
So I think those are things that you need to think about in your typologies. Matt and I were talking a lot about the flexibility ideas that you integrated into this plan over here, the movable walls. I think what you've done is actually feasible, doable. People are talking about it a lot, and I haven't seen anybody execute it yet.
Yeah.
It's I think the next gen housing that we're being asked to look at. I think that your multi-generational idea, I don't think you have to have typology-specific senior housing and you know, housing for families and that sort of stuff. They all work for all people. What you have to do is be able to provide services for the various generational differences, and then they can decide where they want to live. I think that having those choices is important.
Yeah.
So, but you have to have the services available for those folks to use. But this idea, this thought, I'd like to know more about. And I'd like to know if you researched and you saw it done someplace, where was it done successfully so I could see it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much. For those of us who operate in the housing and development field, this thesis, Andrew's thesis, constitutes a critique of the way that field works. Those of us who have been active in Congressman of Urbanism and other places believe that having concentrations of a single product is really stultifying to the making of real communities. And Andrew felt this very strongly and undertook the idea of flexibility at every scale, from the unit to development, redevelopment of this part of Pittsburgh. Now, one might have thought this would be sufficient for a thesis. Heaven knows we've had flexible housing theses before, and it remains a kind of open question for the development community. But no. Andrew had to pick this site, which, if you're a pathologist, you seek the most vivid manifestations of the illness to deal with.
We happen to have one here.
So we have this bizarre gated community which is utterly inconsistent with a site in an urbanizing area. And then, of course, we have industrial multifamily down here at the other end, the wave of the future, progressing toward this non-existent place, which Andrew selected to become a civic place where there is no civic place. So the challenges were enormous, and he dealt with them heroically and energetically, and dealing with the points many of you have made about the urban design aspects. What we haven't talked about is the contribution the existing community makes and his efforts to integrate the new development with it. A community which, by the way, has provided the kind of flexible housing he advocates for centuries. So, as a way of looking at the future of urbanization and housing design, I think Andrew deserves an enormous amount of credit for a really exhausting semester.
All right, we're moving west. We go to the next venue. We'll start in 3 or 4 minutes. Please use some coffee wrap.
Amazing. Yeah, the review was great. Thank you so much. It's really awesome.
Yes, I have.
They're going to get something. Then you can watch the like.